My name is Esther Whitmore, and for most of my life, I was the one people looked past. Not because I didn't work hard, or because I lacked ambition, but because I never needed to be loud about it. My sister Veronica was the opposite. The spotlight gravitated toward her even when she hadn't earned it, and she craved it like oxygen. She wore red to funerals, laughed at quiet people, and treated any space she entered like her own private stage. So when she hosted her milestone celebration at a rooftop venue downtown, I showed up in quiet navy, tucked into a seat at the far end of the table, happy to observe. I wasn't supposed to speak. I knew my place, at least in her eyes. And then, right as the entrees were being cleared and the champagne flutes refilled, Veronica stood up, her voice slicing through the music and chatter. "Esther?" She laughed. "She's just here for the view. Trust me, she couldn't afford the breadsticks." The table roared. I didn't. I sat still, smile steady. And that's when a voice cut through the laughter, calm, male, unmistakably powerful. "She owns this place." The laughter died. Forks froze mid-air, and Veronica, my sister, who had built her world on being seen, was for the first time in her life speechless. Veronica was born performing. Even as children, she commanded attention, whether by reciting poems too loudly at church events or crying just long enough to get out of chores. Our mother called her spirited. Our father called her our star. I called her exhausting. I was 2 years younger and learned early on that if I wanted peace, I had to make myself small. I found corners in crowded rooms, quiet books in loud houses. While Veronica made everyone laugh, I learned to listen, and in those long silences, I picked up things, tensions, motives, patterns, useful things. By the time we were teenagers, it was clear Veronica would always shine, at least in the way our family defined it. She dated quarterbacks, was crowned homecoming queen, and announced she'd be majoring in public relations because I was born to manage people. She said it with a wink, and everyone laughed like it was charming instead of chilling. I got a partial scholarship to a state university and studied accounting. I worked part-time at a diner while she studied abroad in Barcelona, finding herself. She found a few foreign boyfriends, too, and came home with an accent she didn't have before. At family gatherings, Veronica took up most of the space. Her stories, her laughs, her glittering rings always on full display. I sat at the edge of every holiday photo, holding the pie I brought and wearing the same navy coat I'd worn for years. "You should dress brighter, Esther," she'd whisper. "It's okay to want to be noticed." I never told her that I didn't need to be noticed to matter. Our parents beamed at her success. Her engagement to a wealthy hotelier, her Instagram followers, the wedding with swans. She divorced a year later, but the glow never dimmed. Somehow, failure slid off her like water on marble, and somehow they still called me to help with the mortgage when Dad got sick. I didn't mind. Not really. I had started saving early, investing small at first. Low-yield funds, rental properties in quiet towns, a few undervalued commercial lots. I did the numbers right, and the numbers did right by me. What I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents, was that the rooftop venue Veronica booked for her big celebration, I owned it. Quietly, through a holding company I formed 5 years earlier, when the building was still crumbling and the previous owner wanted out. I funded the renovation, hired a hospitality team I trusted, and stayed behind the curtain. Veronica never asked who ran the place. She never cared. She saw marble floors and velvet banquettes and assumed it was a place someone like her was meant to be adored in. She sent me a text invitation 2 weeks before the party. Not a call, not a question, just, "Would love for you to come to the event, sis. Dress chic, not corporate. XOXO, no RSVP option. No detail on seating, just an assumption. I'd show up and blend in. And I did show up, but not to blend. That night, as I stepped out of the car and into the private elevator leading to the rooftop, I could already hear the faint sound of laughter through the ceiling. Music, glassware, and Veronica, somewhere up there, performing. I smiled to myself, adjusted the cuff of my navy blouse, and walked in, not through the front, but the side entrance that staff and owners used. The hostess, who knew exactly who I was, greeted me quietly. "Welcome back, Miss Whitmore." "Thank you," I said, scanning the room. "Don't mention it to the guests." She nodded. "Of course." I took my seat at the far end of the long, glittering table, exactly where Veronica wanted me, out of the way, and I waited. People always assumed that because I was quiet, I lacked ambition. The truth was, I never needed noise to build something real. After college, while Veronica bounced between boyfriends and business ideas that bled red ink, I spent 6 years working for a mid-sized investment firm. I learned everything: how to assess commercial risk, how to structure acquisitions, how to walk through a building that looked like death and see the bones beneath it. My first real investment came when I was 29. A dying bakery in a forgotten neighborhood was selling for less than a year's salary. I bought it, leased the bottom floor to a cafe startup, and held the top for residential. 4 years later, it doubled in value. By 32, I had a portfolio most people twice my age wouldn't touch without a team. I kept a lean office, no assistants, just me, my numbers, and my attorneys when needed. I used holding companies for every acquisition: Whitmore Group, Vale Properties, Blue Row Partners. No red carpet, no magazine spreads. I wasn't after attention. I was after leverage. And one of my favorite acquisitions came unexpectedly through a friend in hospitality. "There's this rooftop venue," she said over coffee. "It's gorgeous, but the owner's done. Bad debts. Needs someone quiet with cash and vision." She slid the file across the table. I opened it, saw the bones, and knew. 3 months later, I closed. The building was mine. I brought in new management, restructured the contracts, paid for renovations. I didn't slap my name on the door. Didn't need to. I preferred watching from the mezzanine while others toasted things they didn't understand. So when I received Veronica's digital invitation to her milestone celebration at that very rooftop, I smiled. She had no idea. And that was the point. I wore navy. Not black, not beige, just deep, steady navy. Understated silk, clean neckline, no label visible. My shoes were quiet, Italian. My purse, older than her latest boyfriend. I arrived early, through the back entrance. The event staff nodded in recognition. A few whispered on Miss Whitmore under their breath, but no one drew attention. My instructions were clear. The rooftop was beautiful that night, lit with golds and violets, floral arrangements so overdone they looked like set pieces from an opera. I recognized Veronica's taste instantly: excessive, photogenic, meant to outshine everyone else. I slipped into the seat they assigned me, far end of the long glass table, right beside the railing. A view seat, Veronica would have said. Translation: somewhere visible, but not important. I watched as guests arrived. Some I recognized from childhood, some from Veronica's chaotic web of social climbing. She kissed cheeks, laughed too loud, posed like every moment was a campaign ad. When she finally noticed me, she gave a brief air kiss and said, "You made it. Good. Wasn't sure you'd know where to find it. Cute top, by the way. Very numbers girl." I smiled. "Good to see you, Veronica." She moved on before I could answer. She never asked about my work. Never had. She assumed I still did taxes or spreadsheets for someone else. Maybe it was easier that way, for her. But the man sitting across from me seemed less distracted. He was older, mid-60s, white hair, expensive watch. He observed more than he spoke. When the appetizers came, he leaned forward slightly. "You're Veronica's sister, right?" "I am," I said, offering a handshake. "Esther." He nodded. "I thought I recognized the last name. You in finance?" "Sort of," I said with a small smile. "I do property acquisitions and restructuring." "Ah," he said, interested. "Private equity side?" "Privately funded. No partners." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. Veronica clinked her fork against her glass, silencing the table. "Let's raise a glass to reinvention," she said brightly, "to becoming who we were always meant to be, and leaving behind the boring parts." The table laughed. She looked right at me when she said boring. But I didn't flinch. I knew something no one else at that table did. the wine in their glasses, the lights overhead, the ground under their heels, none of it belonged to Veronica. It belonged to me. Dinner moved slowly. Veronica made sure of it. Every course came with a story she had to narrate, about the chef, the wine, her close connection to the event planner, which I knew was a lie. She had booked the venue online through the standard corporate site. I watched the booking go through our system myself. She chose the premium package, over-decorated, over-ordered, and never once questioned the price. I sat silently, answering polite questions from strangers seated near me, 2 investment bankers and someone's bored girlfriend, but mostly I listened. That's what I'd always done best. Listen, learn, wait. Veronica didn't notice me watching. She never did. But the older man from earlier, the one who asked about my work, he did. He kept glancing at me when she spoke, as if quietly cross-referencing what she said with what I didn't say. I appreciated that. Most people listen to the loudest person in the room. He seemed to prefer the quiet ones. When the dessert plates were cleared, Veronica stood again. She was in her element, all posture and gleam. A photographer stepped back to frame her. She waited for the hush, as if this were her coronation. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began, voice sweet with a forced sincerity. "Some of you have known me forever. Some of you are just starting to witness my journey." She gestured toward the older man. "And some of you, like Mr. Kavanaugh here, are the very people who've inspired me to reach higher." He nodded cordially, but didn't smile. She turned toward me. "And of course, my sister, Esther. The practical one. The one who always said dreams needed a budget." The crowd chuckled. I didn't. "But tonight, even she gets to enjoy the high life," Veronica went on, lifting her glass, "because sometimes we have to let the quieter ones tag along." Someone laughed too hard. Veronica grinned like she'd won something. I kept my gaze on her, not blinking. Then Mr. Kavanaugh stood. No one expected it, not even Veronica. His stature shifted the room immediately. People sat straighter, like something important was happening. He looked at her a moment, then turned slightly, toward me. "Before we toast," he said calmly, "I'd like to clarify something." Veronica tilted her head, confused, but still smiling. "Of course, please." He gestured to the walls, the lights, the entire rooftop. "You mentioned reinvention. I'd say the person who deserves that toast isn't you, Veronica." He paused, then said it. Clear, final. "Esther owns this place." You could hear the wind between glasses. Even the music had lowered. Veronica laughed, awkward, high-pitched. What?" Mr. Kavanaugh continued. "She owns the building, the business. The lease you signed for this party went through her company." He didn't look angry, just factual. Veronica looked at me like the world had tilted. Her cheeks flushed, her hand faltered with the champagne. "Is that true?" I met her eyes, calm. "It's always been true. You just never asked." She didn't speak. Neither did the table. Because in that moment, the room realized the woman they mocked had been the one holding everything up. Veronica was still standing, but it was clear she wanted to sit. Her eyes darted around the table like she was searching for someone, anyone, to laugh with her, to pretend this was just some misunderstanding, some cruel mix-up. But the room didn't give her that. No one met her eyes. The guests, those influencers, bankers, media consultants, suddenly shifted in their seats like they'd been caught in a lie by association. The photographer lowered his camera. Even the servers, mid-pour, paused like someone had cut the strings of a puppet show. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply leaned back slightly, folded my hands in my lap, and let silence finish what truth had started. Veronica slowly lowered her champagne glass. "You own this building?" she asked, voice cracking slightly. "Yes," I said evenly. "Since before your divorce." A ripple ran through the table. Someone at the end let out a breath, like they'd been holding it too long. I didn't know," she stammered. "You never said anything." I shrugged. "You never asked." She blinked like that alone was a betrayal. "So you just let me plan this here? Book it through the regular site? Without warning me? It's a public venue, open to anyone, I said softly. You chose it. I honored the booking. Mr. Kavanaugh chuckled under his breath, just once. And you handled it like a true professional, Miss Whitmore. That name, my full name, spoken out loud by someone of his stature, hung in the air like incense. He turned back to the group, lifting his glass. To reinvention, he said, and to knowing who's really in the room. Everyone else lifted their glasses, unsure at first, then following his lead. Some glanced at me with the kind of half-smiles people wear when they realize they've misjudged the quiet one. Veronica sat down, slowly. No speech, no recovery. For the rest of the evening, conversation tiptoed around her. People now leaned slightly toward me, asked quiet questions about markets, real estate, how I saw the next quarter shaping up. Not because I'd asked for attention, but because I suddenly had it and they wanted to borrow the warmth. One woman whispered, "You've been here the whole time?" I nodded. Always. It was fascinating to watch how fast status changed in a room like that. Moments earlier, Veronica had been the star. But stars burn fast. I'd spent a decade building something that didn't need an audience to matter. And now that truth had slipped out, it was doing what I'd never done, demanding space. Near the end of the evening, Veronica approached me quietly. Her makeup had cracked a little near her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "All these years, you just let me think I was ahead?" I looked at her, not unkindly. "You weren't ever ahead, Veronica. You were just louder." She flinched, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I gathered my clutch and stood. "It's late," I said. "Thank you for the dinner." She stepped aside. For once, she didn't try to stop me, didn't raise her voice, didn't reach for the spotlight. And as I walked past the tables, past the people who once barely nodded at me, I felt something shift in the air. Not because I wanted their approval, but because I'd finally stepped out from behind my own silence, and the room turned with me. I didn't wait for applause. I never had. As soon as the clinking glasses faded, I rose from my chair, picked up my clutch, and walked out with the same quiet I'd walked in with. I didn't glance back. I didn't need to. Some victories don't come with fireworks. They come with silence, the kind that follows when people finally realize they were wrong about you. The rooftop behind me had dimmed. Conversation resumed, but softer, uncertain, like everyone was still recalibrating the rules of the room. They were. The balance had shifted, and I hadn't lifted my voice once. In the elevator, my reflection stared back. Same navy blouse, same calm eyes. But something felt different. There was a weight in my chest, not heavy, but solid, anchored. Downstairs, a young staff member glanced up from folding linen napkins and offered a respectful nod. "Miss Whitmore." I returned it. "Good night." No one rushed after me. Veronica didn't come stumbling down the stairs, demanding an explanation. I imagined she was still seated, still frozen in that moment of stunned realization. Her world cracked open not by scandal or shouting, but by 5 simple words spoken by someone more powerful than her. "She owns this place." My phone buzzed as I stepped into the night. An email from Whitmore Holdings. Subject: Final Terms. Chicago Redevelopment. I opened it, scanned, approved. That deal would close by morning. I didn't text anyone about what had happened. Didn't tell a friend. Didn't post a quote. What happened tonight wasn't for the internet. It was mine. Because real power doesn't announce itself. It acts. It exits. It doesn't wait for permission. Veronica had always relied on noise. Big entrances, dramatic exits, stories that weren't quite true, but always well told. She had survived by being seen. But I had built something that would outlast the spotlight. Something real, quiet, untouchable. She'd once said, half laughing over wine, that I'd grow old and visible. I remembered that, and I smiled now, not in spite, but in knowing. Because tonight, in the very space she thought she commanded, she finally saw me. Not as her quiet sister, not as the extra guest at her party, but as the one holding the deed. She would try to rewrite it, pretend it was a fun twist, a surprise, a coincidence. But it wouldn't matter. The room had turned. And it didn't turn back. As I stepped into my car, the driver glanced at me through the mirror. "Home, ma'am?" I looked out the window, then said, "One stop first, Michigan and 14th. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." That was the site for the next project, the next rooftop, the next place I'd build from nothing. And as the city moved past my window, lights flickering like a heartbeat I'd long since learned to match, I realized something. I was never the one waiting to be seen. I was the one building what they'd eventually need. And tonight, without a spotlight, without a stage, I was Esther Whitmore. And I didn't need anyone to say my name, for the room to remember it.